Welcome back to In the Waiting Room, where we talk real numbers, real trade-offs, and have real conversations about this industry we love. Now, today, I want to talk about a number that many actors would rather not hear out loud. Yeah. Not because it's false, but because it interrupts a very comforting story. And the story goes something like this. If I just keep training, keep grinding, keep showing up, the industry will eventually expand to meet me. Now, that's a beautiful thought. It's also economically unserious. Now, let me start with a very simple observation. It may seem harsh, but it's delivered with mercy. Trust me. And listen, a lot of actors enter this profession with an implicit belief in growth. We imagine a ladder, a widening road, an expanding universe of opportunity. We assume that the market will keep making room for more and more people, so as long as those people stay committed enough and faithful enough and perhaps broke enough. But the acting labor market does not operate on sentiment. It operates on math, arithmetic, and arithmetic has a very rude personality. Now, I say that with love because I'm not outside of this profession throwing rocks at it. I'm in it. I've auditioned, I've worked, and I've waited. And I've done the thing where you book something real, something visible, and then still have to explain to people that visibility and stability are not the same thing. Now, that's one of the strange features of our business, right? Nobody asks a dentist, so have you made it? Nobody asks a plumber, how many pipes did you almost fix this year? And nobody asks a surgeon, how many operations felt spiritually aligned but didn't quite materialize? But actors get asked, so what have I seen you in? Have you made it? Which is a fascinating question because it has no accepted definition. Does it mean you worked once, worked last year, worked consistently, worked enough to stop complaining, worked enough to stop explaining yourself at Thanksgiving? And because people don't define the question, actors answer it emotionally. That is dangerous. So let's get to the number. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics projects 0% job growth for actors over the next decade. More precisely, actor employment is projected to show little or no change from 2024 to 2034, with about 6,300 openings per year. Most of them expected to come from people leaving the field, retiring, or transferring to other occupations. Zero. Not booming. Not accelerating, not the sky is the limit. Zero. This is not a growing market. It is a static one. It is, in a very practical sense, a zero-sum game. And I know some people hear that and get uncomfortable. They say, well, that sounds so cold. Yes, it is cold. So is the thermometer. That does not make it malicious. In almost any other profession, if I stood up and told a room full of people, ladies and gentlemen, your field has 0% growth, there would be concern. There would be questions. There would be a strategic discussion. Now, actors, we hear it and say, wow. Anyway, I'm manifesting. Now, maybe manifestation is nice for blood pressure. I wouldn't know. But it is not a labor analysis. What 0% growth actually means is this. Let me be precise, because 0% growth does not mean there are no jobs. Now, the BLS still projects about 6,300 openings each year for actors, but most of those openings are not new jobs. They are replacement jobs. That distinction matters. Now, suppose I own a 20-unit apartment building, and every year 3 tenants move out, and I rent those same 3 units again. Would any sane person describe that as Rashad's real estate empire is rapidly expanding? No, that is not growth. That is turnover. But us actors routinely hear openings and mentally convert that into expansion. No, it means people left and someone else stepped in. The industry is not building a bigger pie. It is slicing the same pie differently. Or, to put it in another way, the house is not getting bigger. They're just replacing the windows and doors. And this is why so many actors stay confused for so long. We mistake motion for expansion. And there is always motion in this business. People are booking, people are leaving, people are aging out, people are burning out, people are quitting and becoming teachers, therapists, marketing consultants, lawyers, real estate agents, and very healthy looking people who sleep normal hours. That does not mean the market is growing. It doesn't. It means the chairs are changing occupants. And when you understand that, you begin to understand why so many actors feel like they're running very hard without getting closer to anything durable. Now, let me put myself in the absurd position. Now, suppose I told you I had decided to become a world famous brain surgeon. And I said, my strategy is simple. I'm going to really want it, and I'm going to stay emotionally available, and I'm going to workshop my intentions, and eventually the number of hospitals in America will expand to meet my sincerity. You would not call that ambitious. You would call it nonsense. Yet, your actors say the same thing in prettier language all the time. We say, I'm trusting that the universe will make room. Maybe. Or maybe there are simply too many qualified people for too few slots in a market that is not expanding. That possibility deserves at least as much respect as your horoscope. Oversupply makes the whole thing harsher. Now, here's where it gets more difficult. The market is not just static. It is static and oversupplied. There are more qualified actors than there are roles, and more people willing to work than the industry can absorb, and sometimes for free. So you do not merely have scarcity, you have scarcity surrounded by aspiration. That's a combustible mixture because talent matters, craft matters, persistence matters, but none of those things erase oversupply. This is where actors get into emotional trouble. They experience a market constraint and interpret it as a verdict on their worth. I'm not being seen. They don't get me. The people in power are blind. The system is evil. It's corrupt. The ancestors are testing me. No, sometimes there are simply 500 people in line for one chair. That is not spiritual warfare. That is congestion. And one of the great gifts of economic thinking is that it helps you stop taking impersonal things personally. And let's take theater first, because many actors still imagine theater as the pure artistic realm untouched by market logic. It isn't. It is art under budget pressure. Regional theaters operate on very tight margins. Broadway is a commercial enterprise. These institutions are not first and foremost in the business of discovering your soul. They are in the business of surviving financial reality. So when a producer casts someone with recognizable screen credits, people get offended. They say, but there are brilliant theater actors right now, right here. Yes, there are. But the question being asked by the producer is not who is morally deserving. The question is who reduces risk. If a known actor helps with ticket sales, donor confidence, reviews, publicity, or investor nerves, that actor is economically safer. Not more talented, safer. That's why some actors don't get invited into certain rooms until television or film visibility makes them feel less risky. Again, not hypocrisy, risk management. A lot of actors do not want to hear that, but because they prefer to imagine theater as a church of merit. It is not a church. It is a payroll. How it plays out in television and film? Well, in television and film, actors often assume the explosion of content created an explosion of security. It did not. Streaming gave us more titles. It did not give most actors more continuity. A lot of the work is still built on co-stars, guest stars, very short arcs, 1 week bursts, 2-day bookings, self-tapes into silence. So an actor books one co-star and says, I'm in. No, you are employed for 3 days. That is real. That matters. Now, it's not nothing, but it also, it's not a middle-class career structure. And let me make it ridiculous on purpose. And suppose I call my landlord and say, hey, listen, I had a wonderful week artistically. I only worked for 3 days, but they were very visible days. There was tremendous emotional growth. The landlord will say, that is beautiful. Rent is still due. And markets are rude that way. They do not pay for intention. They do not pay for your internal weather. They do not pay because your scene study teacher once cried and told you that you were a vessel. They pay for booked outcomes. And in a static, oversupplied market, booked outcomes are rationed. This is why I keep saying that acting is not fundamentally underpaid. It is underfrequent. That is a very different problem. If an actor worked union rates frequently enough across a year, many of them would do reasonably well. And some do already, some very small percentage. The problem is not the rate. The problem is the intervals between the rates. You're not drowning because each bucket of water is too small. You're drowning because the buckets arrive once every 3 months. That's a frequency problem. And actors frequently misdiagnose it. And we say, if only day rates were higher. Well, maybe. But if the market still only gives you 6 days, you have changed the optics more than the structure. Now, let's talk about parallel income. This is where we arrive at the section that makes people uncomfortable for the wrong reasons. Parallel income, a lot of actors treat, secondary income like evidence of spiritual impurity, as though if you make money in 2 places, the union sends a note saying you're no longer serious about your craft. That is nonsense. Parallel income is not what weak actors do. It is what economically literate actors do. If the market is static and oversupplied, then parallel income is not a side note. It's a rational adaptation. Only in acting do people romanticize instability. Why? If I said I was an investor and I put all my money into one stock, Jamie Dimon would call that reckless. Kevin O'Leary would say that's nonsense. If I said I was a farmer and planted one crop and just hoped the weather respected my passion, people would call that irresponsible. But let an actor say, I have no backup income, no financial cushion, no second lane, but I'm committed. People call that noble. No. Sometimes they call it noble because financial fragility sounds less poetic. The correct question is not, do you have parallel income? The correct question is, does your parallel income support your artistry or does it consume it? That's a serious question because the wrong side hustle can kill your time, your attention, and your spirit. But the right parallel structure can buy you time, selectivity, reduced panic, better decisions, the ability to say no, and maybe most importantly, the ability not to interpret every job as oxygen. Stability does not weaken artistry. Desperation does. Now let's talk about famous actors because the lie gets exposed there. People will say sometimes, well, that's for struggling actors. Parallel income, that is. No, the logic is broader than that. A lot of well-known actors have diversified or built parallel structures around their careers. Nobody calls them unserious. Samuel Jackson has an acting class on Masterclass listed at 21 lessons in 4 hours and 59 minutes. Helen Mirren, Natalie Portman, they're all also on the platform teaching acting or voice acting. That is reputation being converted into educational product. Now, suppose I, a working actor, teach a scene study intensive on Saturday to support my household. Some people whisper, how's he doing? But let a globally known actor teach online and suddenly it becomes thought leadership. Same action, different press release. Ryan Reynolds is presented by Aviation Gin as a co-owner, and Mint Mobile's own timeline states he was announced as its owner in November 2019. That is not an actor losing faith in acting. That is an actor widening his revenue base. The Bacon brothers, Kevin Bacon and Michael Bacon, have an official site saying they've spent the better part of 3 decades making music together. And they reference a 12th release. That is not a hobby. That is a parallel creative lane built over time. Now, I want to be careful here. The point is not that you need a gin company, a telecom stake, or a touring band by next quarter. The point is that the profession itself does not collapse when actors earn from somewhere else. What collapses is an illusion. And the illusion is, real actors survive on acting alone and only compromised people diversify. That's the illusion. No, some people diversify because they understand arithmetic. And some actors stay poor because they think scarcity is a personality trait. What ordinary actors can actually do, now I'm going to bring it back down from the celebrity examples. What does this mean for the everyday working actor? It means parallel income can look like coaching, teaching, shops, voice work, self-taping services, photography, editing, content consulting, social media production, fitness instructor, live speaking engagements, digital products, micro courses, paid newsletter, copywriting, real estate, waiting tables with dignity instead of shame. There is nothing spiritually superior about being broke in one lane. If your side income gives you the freedom to reject nonsense, it is not a betrayal of the art. It is often what protects it. The dangerous psychology of a static market is this. And this is where I want to get more serious. One reason actors suffer so much is because they internalize structure. When the market does not grow and the chairs do not multiply and they're still outside, they don't say this is a constrained field. They say there must be something wrong with me. That is where people go off the rails. That is where you get shame, panic, self-medication, identity collapse, resentment, random spiritual interpretations of ordinary labor market conditions. A static market plus oversupply plus high identity attachment is a recipe for unnecessary suffering. That's why these conversations matter. Not because numbers are exciting, but because clarity can spare people from writing tragic stories around ordinary structural limits. So, what should the strategy be, right? This is the point somebody always asks. Fine, so what do I do? Good. Now we are in the useful part of the conversation. So if the market is static, oversupplied, and volatile, then the waiting cannot be your only strategy. Your strategy has to include 4 things. Active creation. You cannot wait indefinitely for institutions to create room for you. You need to write, produce, direct, shoot your own material, build an audience, own something. If the market is not building enough doors, build a side entrance. Number 2, radical differentiation. In an oversupplied market, good is crowded. What is specific about you? What do you see clearly? What do you know how to do that makes you less interchangeable? Because if I am interchangeable, I'm vulnerable, right? Number 3, strategic parallel income, not random hustle, strategic support. The right parallel income buys you time. The wrong one buys you ulcers. And number 4, continuous adaptation. The number of jobs may be static, but the tools, platforms, and leverage points keep shifting. If you do not keep adapting, you are not standing still. You are falling behind a moving line. Now let me make strategy ridiculous too. Now suppose the market has 100 chairs and 10,000 people, and my strategy is I will continue doing exactly what everyone else is doing, but with better intention. That is not a strategy. That is optimism wearing a turtleneck. No, strategy means adjusting to the game you are in, not the game you wish existed. Final thought. Markets do not judge your worth. They allocate resources. Confusing those two creates unnecessary suffering. If tomorrow I walk into a market with 1 chair and I do not get it, I am allowed to be disappointed. What I do not need to do is build an entire theology of my unworthiness around that chair. That is too much meaning for 1 chair. Clarity does not make the path easy, but it makes it honest. And honesty, in the long run, is kinder than illusion. Thank you for joining me in the waiting room with Rashad Edwards. Let's talk soon.